A few other residents Victor did not know filled out the small crowd. At the front of the room, 5 people sat behind a folding table. The HOA board Patricia Wolf sat in the middle. She was in her early 50s, dressed like she was heading to a corporate meeting instead of a neighborhood gathering. Her expression was confident, almost smug. She clearly was not expecting any trouble tonight. Next to her sat David Park, the vice president. Then Helen Martinez, the treasurer. The secretary was a younger guy named Brian Foster. The 5th board member was Ruth Anderson, who mostly just nodded along with whatever Patricia said. Victor took a seat in the 3rd row and waited. Patricia called the meeting to order and launched into her prepared remarks. She talked about community values and shared responsibility. She mentioned the importance of maintaining property values and keeping Pinewood Valley a desirable place to live. Then she addressed the fee increase. Her tone shifted, becoming more defensive. She said that some residents had expressed concerns, which was understandable, but the board had done their due diligence. The increase was necessary. The pool was aging and needed major renovations. The landscaping contract was expiring and costs had gone up significantly. There were administrative expenses that needed to be covered. She pulled out a budget breakdown and projected it onto a screen. Victor studied the numbers carefully. Pool renovation, $180,000. New landscaping contract, $72,000 per year, up from $24,000. Administrative costs, $45,000 per year where there had been almost nothing before. Something was definitely wrong. Victor had renovated enough properties to know that pool work was expensive, but $180,000 for a neighborhood pool seemed extreme. And tripling the landscaping budget when the current landscaping looked fine, that made no sense. Patricia asked if anyone had questions. The room was quiet for a moment. People shifted in their seats. Nobody really wanted to speak up. HOA board members had a way of making you feel like you were being difficult if you questioned anything. But Victor had not come to stay silent. He stood up. "I have some questions," he said. His voice was calm and even. Not confrontational, just interested. Patricia looked at him with barely concealed annoyance. "And you are?" "Victor Hayes, I'm a homeowner here in Pinewood Valley." That was technically true. He owned property in the neighborhood. He just owned a lot more than she realized. "Go ahead, Mr. Hayes," Patricia said, trying to sound pleasant. "The pool renovation," Victor began. "Have you gotten multiple quotes for that work?" Patricia blinked. "We have a contractor who has provided a very detailed estimate." "Just one contractor?" Victor asked. For a project that expensive, standard practice would be to get at least 3 competitive bids. "Did the board do that?" David Park jumped in. "We worked with a contractor who came highly recommended. We felt confident in their pricing." Victor nodded slowly. "Okay, and who recommended them?" There was a pause. David and Patricia exchanged a glance. "They were referred to us," David said vaguely. "By whom?" Victor pressed gently. Another pause. Helen, the treasurer, cleared her throat. "I believe it was a family connection. Someone we trust." Victor let that hang in the air for a moment. "A family connection. So not a competitive bidding process, but someone you know personally." Patricia's smile was getting tighter. "Mr. Hayes, we appreciate your interest, but the board has already voted on this. The decision has been made." "I understand," Victor said, "but homeowners have a right to understand where their money is going." "Let me ask about the landscaping contract. Why is it tripling in cost?" Patricia shuffled her papers. "The previous company is no longer able to service our community at the old rate. We've had to find a new provider." "What's the name of the new company?" Victor asked. "Green Valley Landscapes," Brian said, reading from his notes. Victor pulled out his phone and did a quick search. Green Valley Landscapes had a website that looked like it had been thrown together last month. No reviews. No portfolio of previous work. Just some stock photos and a contact form. "This company doesn't seem to have much of a track record," Victor observed. "Did the board verify their credentials?" Patricia's face was starting to flush. "Mr. Hayes, I don't appreciate the implication that we haven't done our homework. This board takes its responsibilities seriously." "I'm not implying anything," Victor said, keeping his tone neutral. "I'm just trying to understand the decision-making process. These are significant expenses, and the homeowners are being asked to pay for them. I think it's reasonable to ask questions." Linda spoke up from her seat. "I'd like to know, too. I'm barely making ends meet as it is. An extra $100 a month is a lot of money for me." Tom nodded. "Same here." I'm on a fixed income. This increase is going to hurt, other voices joined in. Robert asked about the administrative costs. Why were they so high all of a sudden? Patricia explained that the board had decided to compensate the president for time spent on HOA business. $3,000 per month seemed fair for the amount of work involved. That's $36,000 a year, Victor pointed out. For a community of 52 homes, that seems like quite a lot for what has always been a volunteer position. Managing an HOA is real work, Patricia said defensively. I spend hours every week dealing with issues, coordinating with contractors, responding to resident concerns. My time has value. Victor could see where this was going. The board had given itself a raise, handed out contracts to friends and family, and was now asking residents to foot the bill. It was textbook HOA corruption. Small scale, but still corrupt. He decided to show his hand. I have one more question, Victor said. How many properties do you own in Pinewood Valley, Ms. Wolf? Patricia looked confused by the change in topic. Just my residence. Why does that matter? And the rest of the board? How many properties do each of you own here? Each board member confirmed they owned just their own home. Patricia was getting impatient. Mr. Hayes, what is your point? Victor smiled. It was not a mean smile, just the smile of someone who is about to change the entire dynamic of the conversation. My point is that I own 47 properties in this neighborhood, 47 out of 52 homes, which means I own the vast majority of Pinewood Valley. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Patricia's face went from red to pale in about 3 seconds. David's mouth actually fell open. The other board members looked at each other in confusion and growing panic. Victor let the information sink in before continuing. So when you raise HOA fees, you're not raising them on 52 individual homeowners. You're raising them primarily on me, 47 times over, which gives me a pretty strong interest in making sure those fees are justified and that the money is being spent responsibly. Patricia tried to recover. The bylaws don't distinguish between individual owners and multiple property owners. The fees apply equally to all properties. You're absolutely right, Victor agreed. The fees do apply equally, and the bylaws also give homeowners certain rights, like the right to review detailed financial records, the right to question expenditures, and the right to call for a vote on board decisions. He paused, letting his words settle over the room. His tenants were starting to understand what was happening. Linda was smiling now. Tom was sitting up straighter, energized by this unexpected turn of events. So here's what I'd like, Victor continued. I'd like detailed documentation on that pool renovation bid. I'd like to see the actual quotes, not just a summary number. I'd like information on the landscaping company, including proof that they're properly licensed and insured. And I'd like a breakdown of what exactly those administrative costs cover. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but she was smart enough to know she was in a bad position. The board will consider your request, she said stiffly. Actually, under the bylaws, homeowners have a right to review financial documents within 10 business days of requesting them, Victor said. I'm formally requesting them now. I'll expect them within the required time frame. He sat back down. The meeting continued, but the energy had completely changed. Patricia rushed through the rest of the agenda, barely stopping for questions. When she finally adjourned the meeting, the board members practically ran out of the room. Victor stayed behind to talk with his tenants. They crowded around him, excited and relieved. Someone was finally standing up to the board. Someone was asking the questions they had all been afraid to ask. What happens now? Linda wanted to know. Victor thought about it. Now we wait and see what those financial documents show us. I have a feeling there's a lot more to this story than what we heard tonight. Tom shook Victor's hand. Thank you for doing this. Most landlords wouldn't bother. Victor shrugged. You're good tenants. You take care of your homes, you pay your rent on time, you're part of this community. I'm not going to let someone take advantage of you just because they think nobody will push back. As everyone filed out of the community center, Victor hung back for a moment. He looked around the empty room at the folding chairs and the cheap projector screen. He thought about Patricia's face when he had revealed how many properties he owned. He thought about the inflated numbers and the vague answers and the family connections. This was going to get interesting. The board thought they had pulled off a neat little scheme. Raise the fees, pay themselves and their friends, and count on residents being too busy or too intimidated to fight back. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed Pinewood Valley was like every other HOA neighborhood, with dozens of individual owners who would complain but ultimately comply. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who had the resources, the knowledge, and the motivation to dig deeper, someone who owned enough votes to actually change things. Victor turned off the lights and headed home. He had work to do. Victor did not waste any time. The morning after the HOA meeting, he made some calls. First was to his accountant, Kelly, who had been handling his real estate finances for years. She was sharp, detail-oriented, and had a talent for spotting irregularities in financial statements. "I need you to look at some HOA documents," Victor told her. "Something doesn't add up, and I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Kelly was intrigued. "HOA corruption? That's a new one. Usually we're just tracking rental income and expenses." "Well, this one's charging me an extra $56,000 a year," Victor said. "So I'd say it's worth investigating." The second call was to his lawyer, Anthony. Every real estate investor needed a good lawyer, and Victor had found one of the best. Anthony had helped him navigate zoning issues, tenant disputes, and contract negotiations over the years. This would be a different kind of challenge. "Can they really just raise fees by 40% without more justification?" Victor asked. Anthony thought about it. "Depends on the bylaws. Most HOAs have some authority to adjust fees, but there are usually limits. And if board members are benefiting personally from those fees, that's a potential conflict of interest. Send me the bylaws and any financial documents you get. I'll tell you what kind of legal ground we're standing on." Patricia was true to her word, at least technically. Exactly 10 business days after Victor's request, he received a large envelope containing financial documents, bank statements, budget reports, copies of contracts. Everything looked official and proper on the surface. Victor spread it all out on his dining room table and started going through it page by page. Then he scanned everything and sent it to Kelly. They set up a video call for the next evening to go over what she found. When Kelly's face appeared on his screen, she looked equal parts amused and disgusted. "You've got yourself a situation here," she said without preamble. "Want the highlights or the full breakdown?" "Give me the highlights first," Victor said. Kelly pulled up a spreadsheet. "Okay, so let's start with the pool renovation. The quote is from Clearwater Pool and Spa, owned by someone named Frank Martinez. Ring any bells?" Victor thought about it. "Martinez. The treasurer's name is Helen Martinez." "Bingo," Kelly said. "I did some digging. Frank is Helen's cousin. The quote he provided is for $180,000 to renovate a community pool that probably needs about $75,000 to $80,000 in actual work. I pulled comparable projects from the area. He's overcharging by more than double." Victor felt his jaw tighten. "What about the landscaping?" "Green Valley Landscapes is even better," Kelly said with dark humor. "That company was registered 4 months ago by someone named Todd Wolf. Any relation to Patricia Wolf?" "Let me guess. Brother, husband?" "Brother-in-law," Kelly confirmed. He had been working as a sales manager at a car dealership. No landscaping experience at all. But suddenly he's running a landscaping company and charging $72,000 a year to mow some lawns and trim some bushes. The previous company was doing it for $24,000 and doing a good job from what I can tell. Victor shook his head. "So they gave contracts to family members at inflated prices. What else?" Kelly scrolled through her notes. "The administrative costs are my favorite part. Patricia is paying herself $3,000 a month as HOA president. That's not illegal by itself. But according to the bylaws, board members are supposed to serve without compensation, unless approved by a majority vote of all homeowners. Not a board vote, a homeowner vote, which never happened. So she just decided to pay herself?" Victor asked. "Exactly. And that's not all. There's a line item for consulting fees that pays another $1,500 per month to David Park, the vice president. He's apparently consulting on community development initiatives. No documentation of what that actually means. It's just money going into his pocket." Victor did the math in his head. $3,000 for Patricia, $1,500 for David. That was $54,000 per year in what amounted to kickbacks. Add in the overpriced pool renovation and the fake landscaping company, and you were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars being funneled to board members and their families. "This is fraud," Victor said flatly. "It's definitely shady," Kelly agreed. "Whether it rises to criminal fraud or just civil liability, that's a question for your lawyer. But morally, Yeah, they're robbing the neighborhood blind. Victor thanked Kelly and ended the call. He sat at his table for a long time looking at the documents. He had suspected something was wrong, but seeing it all laid out in black and white was different. These people had been elected to serve their community, and instead they were using it as a personal piggy bank. The next day, Victor met with Anthony at a coffee shop downtown. The lawyer reviewed the financial documents and the HOA bylaws while nursing an espresso. "You've got them," Anthony said finally. "Multiple bylaw violations, conflicts of interest, self-dealing. The board has breached their fiduciary duty to the homeowners." "What are our options?" Victor asked. Anthony ticked them off on his fingers. "1, you could file a lawsuit. You'd probably win, but it would take time and money. 2, you could report them to the state attorney general's office for investigation. That would also take time. Or 3, you could use your voting power to remove the entire board and install new leadership." "The bylaws allow that?" Victor asked. "Absolutely. Any homeowner or group of homeowners representing at least 25% of the properties can call for a special election. You own 47 out of 52 properties. You could do this tomorrow if you wanted." Victor thought about it. A lawsuit would be satisfying, but it would drag on for months or years. Reporting them to authorities was the right thing to do, but again, slow. But removing the board? That would send a clear message and fix the problem immediately. "How do we call a special election?" Victor asked. Anthony pulled out a template. "You file a formal notice with the HOA, stating your intent to call a special meeting for the purpose of voting on board member removal and election of new members. You have to give residents at least 2 weeks' notice. At the meeting you need a quorum, which is 50% of homeowners. Then you need a majority vote to remove the current board." Victor smiled. "I have 47 votes. That's 90% of the community." "Exactly," Anthony said. "But here's the thing. You want to do this right. You want it to be clean and by the book so they can't challenge it later. Document everything. Send certified letters. Follow every procedural requirement to the letter." Over the next few days, Victor put together his plan. He created a detailed report summarizing all the financial irregularities he had found. He included side-by-side comparisons of the inflated bids versus market rates. He documented the family relationships between board members and contractors. He listed every bylaw violation. The report was 45 pages long by the time he was finished. It was thorough, factual, and damning. He made enough copies for every household in Pinewood Valley. Then he drafted the formal notice for a special meeting. The purpose? To vote on the immediate removal of all current board members and to elect a new board. Date, 3 weeks from now. Location, the community center. Time, 7 in the evening. He hand-delivered the notice to the HOA along with a copy of his report. The woman working in the HOA office that day looked confused. "I'm not sure what the procedure is for this," she admitted. "Just give it to Patricia," Victor said. "She'll know what to do." Patricia called him that afternoon. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Mr. Hayes?" "I'm exercising my rights as a homeowner," Victor said calmly. "The bylaws are very clear about this. I have the right to call a special meeting." "This is harassment," Patricia said. "You're trying to intimidate the board because you don't want to pay your fair share." "I'm perfectly willing to pay my fair share," Victor replied. "What I'm not willing to do is pay for your salary and your brother-in-law's fake landscaping company and your treasurer's cousin's overpriced pool renovation. That's not my fair share. That's corruption." "How dare you?" Patricia sputtered. "Everything we've done has been completely above board and in the best interest of the community." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Victor said. "Come to the meeting. Bring your documentation. Make your case to the homeowners. Let them decide if they think you've been acting in their best interest." Patricia tried a different approach. "Look, maybe we can work something out. Maybe there's been some miscommunication. If you have concerns about specific expenditures, we can review them." "It's too late for that," Victor said. "The notice has been filed. The meeting is scheduled. If you want to withdraw your fee increase and resign from the board, I'd consider canceling the meeting. Otherwise, we're moving forward." There was a long silence. Then Patricia hung up on him. Victor spent the next week preparing for the meeting. He talked to his tenants, explaining what he had found and what he was trying to do. To a person, they were supportive. They were angry about the attempted cash grab and they were ready to see some accountability. He also reached out to the 5 homeowners who actually owned their properties and lived in them. 2 were board members, so he did not expect cooperation there. But the other 3 were reasonable people who deserved to know what was happening. One of them was an older couple named the Johnsons. They had lived in Pinewood Valley for 15 years, long before Victor started buying properties. He invited them to coffee and walked them through the report. Mrs. Johnson was horrified. "I can't believe Patricia would do this. I've known her for years." "Sometimes people surprise you," Victor said gently, "especially when money's involved." Mr. Johnson was more pragmatic. "What do you need from us?" "Just show up to the meeting," Victor said, "and vote your conscience. If you think the board has been doing a good job, vote to keep them. If you think they've violated the trust of the community, vote for new leadership." The Johnsons looked at each other. "We'll be there," Mrs. Johnson said. The days leading up to the meeting were tense. Patricia and the other board members were clearly scrambling, trying to figure out how to deal with this challenge to their authority. Victor heard through the grapevine that they had consulted their own lawyer, looking for a way to invalidate the special meeting or disqualify Victor's vote somehow. But Anthony had done his homework. Everything was by the book. There was no procedural way to stop what was coming. Victor also started hearing rumors that Patricia was telling people he was a greedy landlord who was trying to take over the HOA for his own benefit. That he would raise rents and squeeze tenants and turn Pinewood Valley into a slum. He was not surprised. When people got desperate, they lied. That was just human nature. 3 days before the meeting, Victor got an unexpected call. It was from a reporter at the local newspaper. "Mr. Hayes, I've been hearing some interesting things about the Pinewood Valley HOA. Would you be willing to comment?" Victor thought about it carefully. The last thing he wanted was to turn this into a media circus. But on the other hand, transparency was important. And if Patricia was going to spread lies about him, maybe it was time to set the record straight. "I'll talk to you," Victor said. "But only if you're willing to look at the actual documents and report the facts." "I'm not interested in it," he said. She said story. The reporter, whose name was Claire, met him the next day. Victor showed her everything. The financial records, the family connections, the bylaw violations. Claire took notes and asked good questions. She was professional and thorough. "This is quite a story," she said when they were finished. "Mind if I reach out to the board for comment?" "Not at all," Victor said. They should have the chance to respond. The story ran the day before the special meeting. It was front page of the local section, complete with a breakdown of the questionable expenditures and quotes from both Victor and Patricia. Patricia had insisted everything was proper and accused Victor of trying to bully the board. But the facts spoke for themselves. By Thursday evening, the community center was packed. Every single one of Victor's tenants showed up. The Johnsons were there. Even a few residents from neighboring HOAs came to watch. And in the back of the room, Claire the reporter sat with her notebook ready to document whatever happened next. Victor had one more move to make. One more revelation that would change everything. But for now, he sat quietly and waited for the meeting to begin. The community center had never been this full. Every chair was occupied and people lined the walls. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and anger. Patricia and the rest of the board sat at their table up front, looking like they would rather be anywhere else. Victor sat in the third row, the same seat he had taken at the previous meeting. His tenants surrounded him. Linda was there with her teenage daughter. Tom had brought a friend from his veterans group for moral support. Robert and his wife sat right behind Victor, ready to back him up if needed. Patricia called the meeting to order. Her voice was steady, but Victor could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew this was not going to go well for her. "This special meeting has been called by Mr. Victor Hayes," Patricia began. "The stated purpose is to vote on the removal of the current board and election of new members. Before we proceed to any votes, I want to make a statement on behalf of the board." She pulled out a prepared speech and started reading. It was the usual defensive language. The board had always acted in good faith. They had made difficult decisions for the benefit of the community. They were being unfairly attacked by someone who did not want to pay his fair share. Victor was a corporate landlord who did not care about Pinewood Valley the way residents who actually lived here did. Victor let her talk. There was no point interrupting. She was going to say what she was going to say. The facts would speak for themselves. When Patricia finished, she looked around the room. Does anyone else wish to speak before we move to a vote? Victor stood up. I do, Patricia nodded curtly. Mr. Hayes. Victor did not move to the front of the room. He just stood where he was so he could see everyone. He wanted this to feel like a conversation, not a lecture. Thank you all for coming tonight, he began. I know a lot of you have questions about why we're here and what's going on, so I want to lay out the facts as clearly as I can. He pulled out copies of his report and started passing them around. I've put together a detailed analysis of the HOA's finances and the fee increase that was proposed. I encourage all of you to read it when you have time. But let me give you the summary. Victor walked through it step by step. The pool renovation quote that was more than double the market rate. The contractor who happened to be the treasurer's cousin. The landscaping company that was owned by the president's brother-in-law and had no experience. The administrative salaries that violated the bylaws. He was calm and factual. He did not raise his voice or get emotional. He just presented the information and let it speak for itself. Now, Ms. Wolf says that I'm a corporate landlord who doesn't care about this community, Victor continued. Let me address that directly. Yes, I own 47 properties in Pinewood Valley. I've been investing in real estate here for 8 years. But let me tell you why I invested here and how I run my business. He turned to look at Linda. Linda, how long have you been renting from me? Linda looked surprised to be called on, but she answered, 4 years. And in those 4 years, how many times have I raised your rent? Linda thought about it. Once, by $50 a month. And you gave me 2 months' notice, Victor nodded. $50 over 4 years. That's about a 3% increase per year, which is below inflation. Tom, same question. How long have you been my tenant and how have I treated you? Tom stood up, his voice strong. 2 years. When I moved in, you charged me $800 a month for a 2-bedroom house. The market rate was at least $1,000. You told me you'd rather have a good tenant at a fair price than squeeze every dollar out of people. And when my water heater broke last winter, you had someone there the same day to replace it. Other tenants started speaking up without being asked. Robert talked about how Victor had never nickel and dimed them over maintenance issues. A woman named Jennifer mentioned that when she had lost her job last year, Victor had given her a month to catch up on rent without threatening eviction. Victor held up his hands. I'm not trying to paint myself as a saint. I'm a businessman. I make a profit from these properties. But I also believe in treating people fairly. My tenants take care of their homes, they're part of this community, and they deserve respect. He turned back to Patricia. So when you accuse me of not caring about Pinewood Valley, you're wrong. I care about it very much. I've invested millions of dollars here. I've provided affordable housing for dozens of families. And I'm not going to stand by and watch this board steal from the community to line their own pockets. Patricia's face was red now. How dare you accuse us of stealing? Everything we've done has been approved through proper channels. Really? Victor asked. Show me where the homeowners voted to approve your salary. Show me the documentation of competitive bids for the pool renovation. Show me proof that Green Valley Landscapes is a legitimate, qualified company, and not just a shell business set up by your brother-in-law 4 months ago. Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it. She could not show any of those things because they did not exist. David Park tried to help. The board has authority to make financial decisions without putting every single expense to a vote. That's what we were elected to do. You're right, Victor agreed. The board does have authority to manage day-to-day operations, but that authority comes with responsibilities. You're required to act in the best interest of all homeowners. You're required to avoid conflicts of interest. You're required to follow the bylaws, and you've violated all of those requirements.